Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another March Madness webinar. Today, I'd like to introduce some of our panelists who are also the executive board for MMGA, but I would like to remind you that your video and microphone will be off during the webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will answer them at the end of this wonderful presentation. Today joining us, we have Vicki Lauren, who's our secretary, Norm Scheer, who's the president of MMGA, Ruth Stillwalker, who's co-interim treasurer with me. I'm Sue Augard, I'm the vice president and co-interim treasurer. And introducing our guest today is Jenny Wanty. Jenny served as the MSU Master Naturalist Coordinator and worked in the Kent County MSU Horticulture Department for 13 years. She also serves on the West Michigan Conservation Network Board and works closely with the Kent and Montcalm Conservation Districts. Jenny.
Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
It's my pleasure to introduce Craig Elston. I've known Craig, I think we decided over 20 years. Craig's complete and very impressive bio is in your newsletter, your MMGA newsletter. I'm just going to hit the highlights. Craig is the naturalist for the city of Hudsonville. He has a wonderful website, cdenature.com. You'll see that again in one of his slides. And he has great resources, including a schedule of the tours he does out at the Nature Center. So if you're in this part of West Michigan sometime and you'd like to hear Craig in person and see the wonderful plants and things that are going on at the Hudsonville Nature Center, look up on his website and see when he's given a tour. Craig was also an instructor for the MSU Master Naturalist program that I ran. He taught native wildflowers as well as created the prairie environments section, which was just outstanding. In addition to being a naturalist at the city of Hudsonville, Craig is the president of the White Pine chapter of the Michigan Botanical Club and is second vice president of the Wildflower Association. And it's my pleasure to introduce the amazing Craig Elston.
Thank you, Jenny. So I can get us up here. Hopefully you can all see that. One more. Okay. All right, we should be on. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. We're going to talk about some rare flowers and the expeditions I've had to find those in Michigan. I suppose I should get this, and now we're ready. As Jenny said, that I do have a website at cdenature.com. Part of that website is a project that probably will be ongoing for many years, but to list pictures to help you identify our native and some non-native wildflowers. Right now, I believe that list is over 250 species. I can be contacted also at cdenature@gmail.com. As Jenny mentioned, I'm the second vice president of the Wildflower Association of Michigan, also currently the president of the White Pine chapter of the Michigan Botanical Club. The Michigan Botanical Club is a statewide organization consisting of anyone interested in botany and plants, from novice beginners to top-notch and world-renowned botanists. Each year, we hold a foray for members, where we spend a long weekend visiting various habitats in search of plants that are new to us. This is a great time spent with like-minded plant lovers, and you get to spend time with top botanists from around the state. And before we get into this, a little bit about my background. As a young boy, I was interested in butterflies. This photo was taken of my collection at 10 years old. I still love butterflies and anything else in the natural world. Also, when I was 10 years old, I acquired my first camera. I took pictures of things in nature on my grandparents' farm. While this scene may not look like much, it is a special place to me that I have spent much time over the years and have shared with my own two sons. And about 10 years later, I acquired my first camera with a removable lens and began shooting wildflowers on walks near my apartment. I began to learn to identify the plants so I would know what I was taking pictures of. I continued to teach myself to identify and learn about what I was finding. After living down the road from the Sarah Nature Center in Benton Harbor for 2.5 years, I moved to Hudsonville in 1987. Just down the road from where I was living, the city was developing a nature park. The next summer, I learned what happens when you voice concern to City Hall. 2 weeks after voicing my concern of the location of one of the trails, I received a letter from the mayor congratulating me on my appointment to the Parks Committee. I have been on the committee ever since and now have a lifetime appointment. As my interest and knowledge of the many plants and birds on this property grew, I began offering tours of the park and then officially appointed as naturalist for the now Hudsonville Nature Center in 1996. I now regularly give interpretive walks in the 75-acre preserve and advise the city on projects and environmental issues. And just as a side note on that, we have begun a flora of the park, and excluding most of the grasses and sedges, we are close to 300 species of plants identified on that 75 acres. Okay, our talk today. First of all, I want to look at a couple things that make plants rare and how we classify them. Degrees of rarity. Endangered species are at the brink of extinction now. Threatened species are likely to be at the brink in the near future. And special concern, while not afforded any legal protection under the Threatened and Endangered Act, many of these species are concerned because of declining or relic populations in the state. Should these species continue to decline, they would be recommended for threatened or endangered status. Just because a species is listed or rare doesn't mean that all are hard to find. Like this Mertensia virginica, Virginia bluebells, they may be plentiful in a small localized area, but not throughout the state. That being said, I won't give locations of some to protect them and to protect my sources. Some reasons for rarity. First one, loss of habitat. Some species we consider to be northern species were present downstate 120 years ago, even in the Grand Rapids area. Due to development, the city moving outward and draining wetlands, conditions that species need have been eliminated. Special conditions. The golden saxifrage that you see in the background of this slide is not necessarily considered rare, but needs cold, springy spots along streams, like the cedar swamps that have been drained for farmland known as Monk in Ottawa County. And actually did find this in Allegan State Game Area a year ago. Specialized relationships. Some are symbiotic or parasitic. And if that relationship is broken, the species may disappear. They may be at the edge of their range. Some species, especially prairie species, may just come into Michigan from Indiana or Ohio, in the western UP from Wisconsin. Or they never were very common to begin with. It may be because of any or a combination of the above mentioned reasons. Couple of sources to share with you on plants. The Michigan Natural Features Inventory, or MNFI, website is a valuable resource. You can access plant and animal list, abstract sheets on species, county list, plant committee information, and much more. And also the detailed information on native plant communities and some ideas of where to find them be found in the book, A Field Guide to Natural Communities of Michigan. Another excellent source of information on Michigan plants and what areas of the state they are found in is michiganflora.net. This site will give you names and information, photos of most species. I encourage you to learn all aspects of the site, including the systematic keys. Michigan Flora is available in book form as well, but without the updates and photos. You can also access this on your phone if you have coverage. The unfortunate part is many times you get into remote areas like especially the UP, and you're going to have to remember what it looks like to get back into cell coverage because you won't be able to pull it up. But in your areas with cell coverage, this is a real handy site to have pull up on your phone. You can go through the keys and pictures right while you're on site. It will also give you a map of each county where the species is known in the state. To have a dot on the map, the species must have a specimen in the University of Michigan herbarium to document its existence. If you are way out of range, I would question the find or have it documented by an expert botanist to confirm and document the new location. Some only have old records and need new collections. Some counties, particularly in close proximity colleges, have much better coverage. A herbarium specimen is simply a collected and pressed plant or part of a plant kept in a herbarium. These are useful for documenting locations of plants historically through the present. They are also used to compare known properly identified specimens to newer ones. Excuse me. A specimen search can be helpful in locating non-listed species if the records are not too old. Old records can be useful to know areas to look. This species is the first we're going to look at. Notice that it was not known or documented in Ottawa County prior to 1999. And this specimen did come out of the Hudsonville Nature Center. One of the first special plants I found was right down the road from where I was living and in the Hudsonville Nature Park, as it was called then. Jeffersonia diphylla. Twin leaf is listed as special concern. It is found in rich deciduous forest, especially on floodplains and well-drained slopes above floodplains. The genus name honors the third president, botanical patron Thomas Jefferson. In the May 1792 meeting of the American Philosophical Society, Benjamin Smith Barton assigned the wildflower twin leaf to a new genus, Jeffersonia, to honor Jefferson's knowledge of natural history, especially in botany and zoology. He said the information of this gentleman is equaled by that of few persons in the United States. Emma Cole wrote, rich, moist woods, rare, mid-April, Reed's Lake Woods. In the 70s, it grew in the woods along Plaster Creek south of Hall Street. And this is a good illustration of what I talked about, development moving out. If you look at a lot of Emma's old records, they are now under concrete or buildings. Another interesting and sometimes helpful resource is Emma Cole's 1901 Grand Rapids Flora. Miss Cole taught for 26 years at Grand Rapids Central High School. She was also a very accomplished botanist. I will mention some of her comments about some plants in the Grand Rapids area. In the early 1990s, the White Pine chapter of the Michigan Botanical Club went on a field trip in mid-April to see Trillium nivalis, snow trillium, in bloom. After crossing a railroad trestle and descending a steep embankment to the woods along a creek in Ionia County, we found snow trillium in bloom. As you can see, compared to the quarter on the ground in front of the plant here, they are very small and only a couple of inches tall. Snow trillium is listed as threatened, and Michigan Flora states it is very rare and local. It is currently known historically from 4 counties in Michigan, including Kent. It is likely no longer in Kent County. Emma Cole listed it as rare but notes this from Miss Anna M. Clark. This species, having been frequent about the city in the 70s, that's 150 years ago now, is long gone from the Grand Rapids area. And I have spent most of 30 years looking in Ottawa County, as there have been reports of years ago of it having been in Ottawa County, but the right habitat is probably long gone. Snow trilliums are said to bloom around the 4th of April with or without snow. While Durca palustrius or leatherwood is not rare in the state, I had to work to find the first ones for me. It blooms in April and may be overlooked by the early bloom time. Emma Cole wrote that it was frequent in Georgetown, which is the township I live in, and other woods in the area. I couldn't find it and kept researching the plant and where to look. After a round trip of about 200 miles to Jones and Three Oaks, finally found a few. Then after much searching, I have found one specimen in Grand River Park in Georgetown. And that specimen is on the side of a very steep embankment. Since then, I have found other locations such as Rosie Mounds and Amon Park in Ottawa County. I have also found a sizable population in Mackinac County, which is a new county record. Durca has a distinct color and shape with a single stem and umbrella-like crown. It does stand out early in the season from trees in the woodland. The leaves also resemble spice bush in appearance. While a gentleman was showing me potential snow trillium locations, he showed me a floodplain along a large creek. He said that Fred Case had found what at that time was thought to be the rarest plant in Michigan. The plant was the endangered Plantago cordata, heart-leaved plantain. Not having been seen since 1925, it was thought to have been extirpated from the state until it was found again in 1990. It has since been found in other locations. In early June 2019, a photo was posted on the NBC Facebook page. I requested and was given coordinates to the location, and off I went. This deep floodplain woods was about 6 inches deep in water, full of poison ivy and many fallen logs to trip on. With its large leaves that resemble skunk cabbage, this plantain didn't take too long to locate. If it looks similar, it's because it looks like the common plantain of your yard, only on steroids. One clue that is not skunk cabbage is the flowering stems arising from the plant. And yes, here is the flower. And yes, this is one that my wife said you drove all the way for that. Trillium grandiflorum, the common great white trillium, is not rare, but this color form in the UP is. There are woods northwest of St. Ignace that many of the trilliums will open pink after a cold winter. Berrien County is likely the only location in the state for the native population of the threatened Trillium recurvatum, or prairie trillium. Other county records are thought to be escapees from cultivation. It can be found both at Warren Woods and the M&A Trillium Ravine Preserve. It is found in rich floodplains and upland beech maple forest. Also at Trillium Ravine, you will find the threatened Trillium sisal, or toadshade, found in rich forest, especially on floodplains. And I just saw a report, I think yesterday, that harbinger of spring is blooming in that preserve right now. In 1998, the threatened Iris lacustris, dwarf lake iris, was designated as Michigan's official state wildflower. This cheery little flower can be found blooming for nearly a month in May and early June along the Cobble northern shorelines of Lake Michigan and Huron, as well as the southern shores of these lakes in the extreme northern lower peninsula. I had looked for this plant for years in roadside ditches where I was told it would be found. One fall at the headlands in Emmett County, I noticed massive amounts of short plants that looked like little irises. Sure enough, the next spring I found many of them in bloom there. Some shoreline populations are currently underwater with the high water levels. At only about 2 inches tall and blending into the rocky cobble or hidden under the edge of the cedars, it can be difficult to find. An endemic Great Lakes species, it is currently known outside of Michigan only for Manitoulin Island, the Bruce Peninsula of Ontario, and the Door Peninsula of Wisconsin. After years of seeking a special concern, green violet, and finding old known locations gone, including under one of the runways of the Grand Rapids Airport, I saw a posting on Facebook of the non-viola violet in bloom. So after a 2-hour drive in the rain and a short walk in the dark woods under dark cloudy skies, my friend and I found green violet along with some other interesting species at the Nature Conservancy's Nan Western Preserve in Washtenaw County. I tried to find a threatened Calypso bulbosa or Calypso orchid in Wilderness State Park without success. Then on Memorial Day weekend 2019, a friend posted pictures of it in bloom in the UP. After contacting him for directions, he said if I met him at St. Ignace at 7 in the morning, he would take me to it. So on Monday afternoon, while everybody else is heading south from the holiday, I headed north, and at 7 the next morning, we headed out. Photographers have been known to pick the flowers to prevent others from photographing this little beauty, and that has contributed to part of its rareness. Ram's Head Lady Slipper, an artist friend, shared the location of this special concern species in a preserve near Conway. Because of the low light conditions where it was growing under the fir trees, I made the annual pilgrimage for about 3 years to get good photos of this charming little orchid. While it is rare, I have since found it in other habitats and locations in the UP. I first heard of the threatened Geum prairie smoke in 1995 when the Botanical Club put out a notice that we could rescue plants from a development site in Newaygo. Several of us got together and under MDNR permission relocated several thousand plants one day in June. Should you collect threatened and endangered species? Keep in mind that all parts of the plant are protected and illegal to collect or possess without special collection permits from wild. Random collection can also make rare plants rarer. Some of these things have been through a process legally brought into cultivation and can be purchased from some of the native plant nurseries. But just going out and randomly collecting them is illegal. With a letter of permission on the front seat of my car, I returned home with 107 plants. These were split between the Hudsonville Nature Center and my yard. I still have it at the edge of my small prairie. Since then, I have found it in a few other locations in Newaygo and Allegan counties, as well as Drummond Island. The inconspicuous flowers appear in May, followed by the beautiful showy fruits with very long plumose styles in June. This is the time when most people actually look for this plant, is when it's in seed. There are still some sizable populations such as at the Maxton Plains on Drummond Island. To see this kind of display may take a few trips since it doesn't happen every year. The Maxton Plains is a marvelous place for rare and stunted plants. It is well worth getting to know. In some of these areas of West Michigan where you are finding prairie smoke that also have wild lupin, you could possibly find a state threatened and federally endangered Carner blue butterfly. The endangered Silene virginica, or fire pink. I had seen this brilliant flower in Virginia, but not Michigan until June of 2018. After another posting on the NBC Facebook page, a friend and I headed to Portland, in the same woods that we had found the snow trillium. Rather than on the low banks of the floodplain area, fire pink was on the steep side of steep slopes high above the Grand River. It is a wonder that I didn't end up in the river from the precarious positions with a tripod. And then after navigating the steep slope, we found many more on top of the hill, in the edges of the woods, and on more level ground. Hyssop leaf fleabane, threatened in Michigan. This little white flower is known from marl fens and associated open tamarack cedar swamps of Mackinac County. And if you have traveled 123 between St. Ignace or I-75 and Paradise, you have driven within 100 yards of this plant. These same cedar swamps are home to many colorful and interesting plants, including Arethusa bulbosa, known as Arethusa or dragon's mouth orchid. While the statuesque American Columbo is not considered a rare plant, many of us have never seen it. After many years of visiting a location at the trailhead of the Calhaven Trail and never seen it bloom, I finally saw it blooming at the Mines Golf Course in Grand Rapids. This picture was the scene of the Allegan State Game Area in 2019, a once-in-a-lifetime and exceptional bloom year. And there were literally dozens, if not hundreds of plants blooming that July. The monocarpic plant with a large rosette of broad, light green leaves for a number of years, even decades, blooms once, sets seeds, and dies. The unique flowers are found in whorls around the stem, which can reach 6 feet or more in height. Columbo is found in dry, such as oak hickory or sassafras, or sometimes most forests and openings. The endangered Michigan monkey flower is the only plant entirely endemic to Michigan. It is found in cold calcareous springs, seeps, and streams through northern white cedar, as well as at the base of bluffs near the Great Lakes shoreline, where it forms low mats. This was on my list for several years. I attended guided hikes with conservancy groups to no avail. Then I was taken to a place that had been seen several years before. We believed we found leaves of the plant that had already bloomed in a roadside ditch. Returning the next year to the ditch a little earlier in July, I found it blooming. I was also given an area in Glen Lake where I found large mats of this growing. And if you're like a lot of wetland plants, if you're going to find this, go prepared to get muddy. Endemic to the sand beaches and dunes of Lakes Michigan and Huron, and 2 sites on Lake Superior. Listed as threatened under both Michigan and federal law. Dune or pitcher's thistle isn't very difficult to find. Found in various Ottawa County parks and quite easily found along Highway 116 on the way to Ludington State Park and along US 2 west of St. Ignace in the UP. This thistle was first noted by Zena Pitcher on the great sandbanks of Lake Superior, presumably the Grand Sable Dunes, during 1826 to 1828 period when Pitcher was stationed as Army surgeon at Fort Bradley in Sault Ste. Marie. First-year rosettes can be mistaken for wild wormwood. The wormwood is the inset with a much finer leaf, not as white. As with many thistles, pitcher's thistle is a larval host plant of the American painted lady butterfly. The threatened Lake Huron tansy can often be found in the same northern dunes and shorelines as pitcher's thistle in the northern lower and eastern upper peninsula. The lovely little special concern butterwort was on my list to find for many years. One day, while visiting a Lake Huron shoreline near the Dolomite mine west of Cedarville, I stumbled across this little plant. Because of my excitement, my friend came running over thinking I had been hurt. The bright chartreuse leaves of this carnivorous plant attract insects to digest and extract nutrients from. Butterwort is found in wet depressions within dunes along Great Lakes northern shorelines, along Cobley, Marley shores, and Marley fens, especially in eastern Upper Peninsula, as well as on alkaline bedrock, such as conglomerate and basalt, shores of Lake Superior in the western Upper Peninsula. If you were in the Master Naturalist class that taught for 13 years, you might remember this photo of what used to be Prairie Ronde in Kalamazoo County. Old prairie books list the cemetery at this site as having Hills thistle, but I have never found it there in nearly 30 years of looking for it. But in 2019, I heard about it growing near Grayling, some 220 miles north. Yes, I went and found it in Jack Pine area. I have also since found it at the Maxton Plains and Drummond Island. And anytime I'm in Grayling in August, I like to stop and check on Solidago vossii, Voss's goldenrod. Although a specimen had been collected at the site as early as 1933, Edward Voss first noted in 1960s that a goldenrod population on the sandy shores of Tiny House Lake in Crawford County, Michigan, resembled Solidago houghtonii and reported it as that species. From morphological observations and a chromosome count in the 1970s, it was believed that the Howes Lake plants were distinct from the true S. houghtonii and suggested these plants might have a hybrid origin different from that of houghtonii. In 2010, after genetic testing, it was named as a separate species. It is now believed to be contiguous within an area approximately 2¼ square miles in 2 counties. If you locate one of these signs at the edge of the road in the right area, you have found a good place to look for Voss's goldenrod. Asclepias. Michigan has 11 native species, 3 of which are threatened and 1 is endangered. As of July 2020, I have found and photographed all 11 species of Asclepias in Michigan. And I will just go from left to right, going across the top row first. We have clasping milkweed, poke milkweed, prairie or tall green milkweed, swamp milkweed, dwarf milkweed, purple, Sullivan's milkweed, common milkweed, butterfly weed, world milkweed, and green milkweed. And if you hit the right timing in Allegan State Game Area, it is possible to find 7 species in one day. Michigan Natural Features Inventory had a post on Facebook about a rare milkweed, the dwarf milkweed, Asclepias ovifolia. It showed pictures of the area and this Google map image of the area. Wanting to find all the Asclepias in Michigan, I saved the images and info to my places to visit folder. In late June of 2019, another botanist posted pictures of this rare plant blooming. This gave me a time frame in which to look for it. So after much on and off again plans with COVID, I finally ended up with a campsite where I could take a shower at Fayette State Park for the end of June, beginning of July 2020. So on Tuesday morning, with printouts of the images in hand, I headed to Menominee. When I arrived, I saw the scene of this photo, but no milkweed of any kind. So I started searching the open oak savanna area and finally came across a small patch of dwarf milkweed. I was awed by its beauty as I observed and photographed it. So on Tuesday, from a few feet from where this plant is located, I could see Wisconsin across the river. And then some 500 miles from there on Saturday, I could see Canada across the Sinclair River as I entered the Algonac State Park to find 2 other listed milkweeds. My main species of interest was the threatened Asclepias sullivanti, Sullivan's milkweed. They are found in moist prairies and were easy to find along the trail in the prairie at the state park. An added bonus was another threatened species, Asclepias purpurescens, purple milkweed, which I had seen once before but needed better photos of. And some of the depth of color in these purple milkweeds take it to almost black. The trip was worth the time and effort, even though my wife had to remove this hitchhiker from my back the next morning. Known from 7 counties in Michigan in dry sandy fields, prairie relics, and oak barrens, this threatened species can be found in one of Ottawa County's parks. It can be difficult to see as it blends well with the background vegetation. I first heard of bastard pennyroyal from an NBC botanical foray. One of the other field trips saw it, so I went back the next week and walked the whole area to no avail. Then I saw a posting on Facebook from Ottawa County and asked for directions and found it at Robinson Forest. Another name is blue curls. Another Trichostoma species found in Michigan, the false pennyroyal, I also found without looking for it, but found on the Maxton Plains and Drummond Island. False pennyroyal is known from limestone areas such as at Drummond Island and Thunder Bay Island, and also very local in sandy fields or other sterile ground. I have accidentally found the threatened pine drops in both Copper Harbor and in Ottawa County Park. It is found in dry to moist woods dominated by pines or mixed conifers, usually with a well-developed needle duff. Pine drops is dependent upon a fungus that forms mycorrhizal relationship with a forest tree. The special concern grooved yellow flax is a small, very inconspicuous plant found in prairies and dry sand open ground like the Newaygo Prairie. It can be difficult to find as the short, slender plant blends in with the surrounding vegetation. Grooved yellow flax gets its name from the grooved seeds. The threatened round-fruited loosestrife was an accidental find at the edge of a lake in Allegan State Game Area in 2017. Because of high water and access to the site, it has not been seen since. This is a good example of the possibilities when exploring new sites. I'll add, I was at that site this week. The water levels are down, so maybe this year will be a good year to find it again. Many people know a special concern, meadow beauty, with its rich pink flowers. It can be found in sunny, moist, sandy to mucky shores and swales in acid soil. Seasonal water fluctuations seem to promote prolific flowering, as seen here in one of Ottawa County's open spaces. It seems to like a very wet spring, even flooded, with a drier summer to begin blooming. Not as common and known from only 2 counties in Michigan, the threatened Maryland meadow beauty can grow alongside of Virginia meadow beauty. But notice the paler petal color. And there are other physiological differences in the plant that are quite noticeable once you compare the two. The endangered orange-fringed orchid can be found at Bishop's Bog in Portage along the boardwalk trail in July. And the last one here, I cannot show you pictures of the flowers of the putty root orchid, as I am going to be hunting for the flowers of this orchid in May. While not listed, many people have never seen this plant. The leaves appear in the fall and are very efficient in photosynthesizing at temperatures to around 35 degrees. as long as they are not covered in snow. By the time the small flowers appear, the leaves can no longer be found. So one thing I've learned in searching for native plants is if you are clean and comfortable, you probably haven't found anything good. If you see me from either of these views, stop and say hello. I'm always glad to share with what I'm shooting. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Craig. That was wonderful and very informative. I have a question for you and Jenny. Are you aware of any apps that can be downloaded to help identify native plants?
There are a few. Plant Snap, I think it is, comes to mind. They are fairly reliable from what I hear. I don't use them. I use field guides. And if I was to use one, I would use it as a starting point and then go to the Flora to confirm it.
Do you have field guides that you would recommend?
Newcomb's Wildflowers is good. I have an old Wildflowers and Weeds by, I think, Zimmerman, that I use as a starting point. A lot of times it gets me within the family or genus, and then I can go from there with the more detailed keys like Michigan Flora.
Yeah, some of the, Marty McCleary, our previous speaker, put in the chat some suggestions for apps.
Who did?
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, you have to have, there are some books put together based on, you know, the flower of the plant, which works, of course, great when the flower is flowering. Otherwise, you know, as Craig suggested, Newcomb's, but that's a dichotomous key and you need to understand how that works. And for some people, that's a bit confusing in the beginning, but it's the best.
And
So you kind of need to maybe start with something that you're really comfortable with and then build, because it's, you know, it takes a while to get the hang of this.
And unfortunately, the Linnaean system that we use is all based on the flowers, the reproduction parts. And I tell people, if you get to know the plant when it's blooming, it's easy to identify most of them, at least into the genus level, when they're not blooming. But it takes a little time and practice.
Or you can do what I'm going to do shortly, is a master naturalist sent me a picture of a flower she had never seen before, and I'm going to send it to Craig shortly. Just say,
Hopefully
help
it's
me with
easy.
this.
Hopefully it's easy.
I don't know. I've never seen it before, so you'll
So
probably
Craig
be
and
so.
Jenny,
I
would
know what
you
this is.
email me all that information you just talked about so we can add it to our website for our guests?
That
And-
means I have to spell dichotomous key, but I can figure
Good
it
luck.
out.
And we have a question, is it hard to get a permit to transplant native plants?
Probably depends on who you are. It depends on what the threatened and endangered is where you need the permit mostly. If they're not listed and you have landowners' permission, you can transplant.
You could always too check with your local Wild Ones chapter, because I know they're usually tied into this, and at least the River City group that's in Grand Rapids has, you know, known about developments coming, and we've raced in there to dig up trillium and other sorts of things. So
And that's probably just with landowners' permission.
And is there, I mean, if they wanted to apply for that, where would they apply for that?
The DNR, what do they call it now? Eagle. You'd have to just go search through the website because they move it all the time.
Okay. And Craig, would you please go back and post your last slide with your website information? And Andrea posted, love this presentation, especially how dedicated and ready to travel this horticulture or flower photographer is. Both my husband and I were chuckling at the vivid descriptions of the speaker. Great presentation and thank you. Thank you, Andrea, for saying that. I've just met Craig through Ginny, and my hope is, as a little shutterbug myself, that we're going to go follow Craig on one of his tours soon, so I can see what he's seeing and getting photos of. I'm pretty excited about that. Do we have?
I will also add that conservation districts, local conservation districts and wildlands chapters have native plant cells, and sometimes you can find, you know, some of these, like the world milkweed's gonna be for sale, one of these organizations. I've forgotten if it's the conservation or somebody else, but you know, you just kind of got to keep looking, and you're not going to find all Craig's 11 milkweeds, which I covet each one of them, but you know, you can try to find, you know, one maybe.
And I'm seeing more native cultivars at nurseries. Craig, could you, for people who don't know the difference between a native and a native cultivar, could you just discuss that a little bit?
Oh, that's a hard one. Not quite sure the definition on that. It's kind of a gray area to me, because we can take naturally occurring mutations of plants and isolate them in the nursery industry and have a new variety. But oftentimes some of those may be sterile. They may not reproduce by seed. It has to be vegetatively. There's a lot of debate right now as to whether they're good or bad. Probably somewhere in the middle. Hopefully that helps. It's kind of a new topic out there right now.
Yeah, and it's just hard. You know, I think I saw, you know, in the Grand Ideas Garden at the Michigan State Extension Cooperative Extension Office in Grand Rapids, they're growing the native or the cultivar of blue stem, and it's bluer and it's shorter and it's sturdier, and you know, it's a great plant. But then it's like, are the same insects coming? Do they know that that's the plant purple? That's blue stem? I don't know.
So part of it too is if you go back and look at a lot of varieties that are similar to native plants, they probably are a naturally occurring mutation of that plant. I forget the name of the author, but there is a book out that tells stories of how they found a lot of these type of plants and brought them into the industry.
And that's research that's ongoing from what I can see about the difference, like Ginny just said, do critters, bugs, birds, bees that use the native plant recognize the cultivars of the native plant? And time will tell, and the researchers will let us know, I guess. For all of you looking at Craig's slide here, if you haven't been to these websites, please visit them. They're just loaded with tons of great information. I highly recommend all of them.
And if you're really interested in learning about where you live and what the original native flora and fauna was, you know, Michigan Natural Features is a great source for pre-settlement maps, and you can kind of learn, you know, what used to be where you are, which is can be fascinating, especially if you want to restore part of your landscape to something more original.
Yeah.
Those are very interesting. Even right here in Hudsonville, at our nature center, there is listed a pond hole that is now just a creek going into the road. They filled it in when they put the road in. And then down the road by our high school, it mentions a walnut grove. And there are still remnant trees of that walnut grove along the creek. So there's a little historical value to keeping some of those trees.
Well, I don't see any more questions. I'd like to remind you, we're down to 2 webinars to finish out our craziness of March Madness. Monday at 7 p.m. we have For the Birds, Fostering Backyard Habitats to Attract Birds with Curtis Dykstra from the Ottawa Parks Department. Is that correct, Jenny? The Ottawa.
Yes, that is correct. He's the naturalist with Ottawa County Parks and one of the best birders I've ever met.
And then we're ending this wonderful month with Marty McCleary will be joining us again to do another presentation. This one's on Aldo Leopold, the father of landscape ethic. He was a naturalist, a scientist, an ecologist, forester, conservationist, environmentalist, and I don't know how he squeezes in, but he was also a professor at the University of Wisconsin. I mean, I've never heard so many titles in my life, but thanks to Ginny and Marty, I've been learning more about him, and he's quite an interesting person and was way ahead of his time. So please feel free to join us for those last two, and we thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Craig. That was wonderful.
Welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Ginny.
you.